Welcome back. Today we are going to be answering a version of a question that we've been receiving from a lot of our coaching clients, folks in our EXP family, and this is about how to prove your worth to buyers. Now, this is going to be something that will tee all of you up to be very curious about our ethical real estate professional designation, which we'll be talking about throughout today's podcast, but I'll shortcut it for you. Absolutely positively right now, go to your text on your phone and text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. Text the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. And when we open the doors for the new ethical real estate professional designation, which I am positive all of you are going to love being part of, you're going to be on the invite list. And the only way to be invited to the launch event, which will hopefully take place in the next 30 days or less, is by texting the word buyer, B-U-Y-E-R, to 47372. Do that right away. So today, Julie, we're going to be talking about 4 ways to wow your buyers.
Yes, and specifically 4 ways to overcome higher interest rate mortgages. And here's why. Because there's so much discussion right now. Everybody was expecting rates to go a lot further down. The biggest objection when following up with buyers is what? I want to wait till rates come down. How many people don't know? How many people in your pipeline right now, your database, your open house leads, your friends are sitting on the sidelines saying, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait, I'm going to wait. Okay, so your response is, that's interesting. So what rate are you shooting for, right?
Or at what Mr. Seller or Mr. Buyer rather, that's what Julie says is fantastic, but you can personalize it even, right? You could say, if a buyer says, who also has a house to sell, well, I'm going to wait for rates to fall. That's interesting. Just so that I'm clear, what advantage are there or is there to you? What perceived advantage is there to you to waiting for rates to fall? Because Mr. Buyer, if the rates fall, that means more buyers are going to be in the market. What do you think will happen to the cost of homes? Will the value of homes with more demand go up or go down? So even if you are buying a house right now at an interest rate you don't find particularly palatable, you're buying a home that will inevitably be cost less now than it will in 6 months or 12 months, and you can always refinance, whereas the home's going to already have been sold.
That's exactly right. And so you can also ask them, what rate are you thinking of? Because they're going to tell you, they'll say, well, I want it to be around 5.5 or 6, okay? Or even in the low 6s. I don't want to pay close to 7% or whatever the going rate is. It's been hovering around 7, okay? And we all know rates are probably going to come down in the coming months. But what if you found out that you could close in the mid-5s? You could close 6% or less right now. Don't you think that's going to create an interesting discussion? They're going to say, how? And so we're bringing you 4 different ways to overcome the high interest rate mortgage discussion.
And if you want the notes for today's podcast, which you absolutely will, because there is a lot of, math, yuck,
detail
in this podcast and our notes, and we're not going to read you the math. So you're going to have the notes and use our notes for your own real estate business, for training and coaching your team. Other agents, it does not matter. You need this information as you roll into the holiday parties, and you're going to be rolling across conversations constantly that are, in alignment with what we're trying to help you overcome today. You're going to want to know how to speak about this stuff with a high level of confidence. Because after all, Julie,
knowledge equals confidence. Ignorance equals fear. Which side are you on? Okay.
I always try to trip Julie up because she wrote that as a chapter in our book. And so occasionally I'll do that just to see if she's paying attention.
And I know. And also, I was reading the notes ahead while you asked me that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. So go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and subscribe. All you got to do is put your email address in. It doesn't cost you anything. Harris Real Estate Daily is our daily newsletter. We'll send you all of our podcast notes as well as some other content specifically geared towards the actual newsletter, and only for newsletter subscribers. And like I said, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. Just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com and put in your email. There's also a link below in the show description. No matter what, if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, doesn't matter. It's there. All right, Jules.
That's right. And these particular notes, if I was out there in the real estate wilds as you are, I would actually keep this in the notes section of my phone, this particular newsletter, because there is some math and there are some examples of how to get that rate down.
I would too. Matter of fact, I would save this so you could just pull it up in your email or whatever and just actually give it to the prospective client so they can read it themselves.
Yes, like during open houses, lead follow-up, door knocking, all the things. So number 1, again, we're talking about how to get rates down, buy down mortgages. I'm going to describe it. You have the notes because you want to read through this in the particulars. Okay, buy down mortgages. A buy down mortgage offers temporary interest rate relief by lowering payments for the first few years of the loan. In a 2-1 buy down, the interest rate is reduced by 2% in the first year and 1% in the second year before settling into the full rate in the third year. A 3-2-1 buy down extends this relief for 3 years instead of 2, with 3%, 2%, and 1% reductions in each respective year. Now, the buy down payment can be made by the cost of doing the buy down, which will be paid to the lender, can be made by the home buyer themselves, the seller, the builder, or sometimes even the mortgage lender. Okay? It's designed to help make the mortgage more affordable early on. However, home buyers should be aware that after the buy down period ends, they will face a higher monthly rate, a monthly payment at the full interest rate. But they do have caps. It's not like you just go to some wild rate. Buy downs are typically available when purchasing or refinancing a primary residence or a second home, but they are generally unavailable for investment properties or cash out refinancing. Sellers and builders frequently offer buy downs to make their properties more appealing by reducing the buyer's initial payments. Okay, now I'm not going to read through all this math, so don't worry.
Let me look at your notes. I want to see if you did something, included something. Nope.
I don't know.
Nope. Oh, I got a bonus point for your first point then. I'm so glad. Okay, go ahead. Because I had a coaching call with Dan the other day, and he has somebody that is, I'll go ahead and talk about it now.
Okay.
All right. So one of the things that and we talked about this in our podcast, and obviously we trained all of our premier coaching clients to do this as well. All of the mortgages, well, I shouldn't say that. I suppose there's one outlier.
Nearly all.
Are assumable.
Yes.
So if you have somebody that's if this has one of these super low mortgage interest rates, the mortgage is assumable. It's called assumable with release. Now, assumable with release mortgage takes longer to get approved, like maybe a month longer, especially this time of year. But the reality of it is that means that, how does it work? Let's say the buyer bought the house 5 years ago and their interest rate was 3.75%. And let's say you have a buyer that just that's, an important number for them because they just have some sort of mooring line about paying more than whatever percent. It doesn't matter. You can go to that seller, and let's say the seller's got $200,000 worth of equity. That buyer, following me on all this, dear listener, that buyer will use the $200,000 that they would have put down on that $500,000 house, give it to the seller, essentially to cash them out of their equity, and then assume their existing mortgage with 25 years left on it at the low interest rate. You following me on all this? So Dan has an example of somebody with a $3 million house. That's
a great example.
$3.2 million they're about to put for sale. Now, in his market, the buyer of that house would have to put down most likely, let's say $300,000, but probably $500,000. Okay, so the equity situation in this that the seller has in the house is somewhere around $500,000. So what Dan is going to do, thanks to his amazing coach, Moa, is he's going to market the property that it's an assumable mortgage at 3.75%, or I think it's actually 4.1%. And the buyer has to put down $500,000. Do you think that's going to make that house a billion times more appealing? Isn't that incredible? And, here's the thing also. Is probably all the homes that he's going to be competing with when he puts this for sale, all of those also have assumable mortgages, but those listing agents aren't listening to our podcast and don't know anything about what we just said. So that means that at closing, the buyer will write the check. The money, their $500,000, which would have gone to the loan, to as their down payment, it's going to go to the seller. They're then going to assume the mortgage at the seller's current for the seller's current term and mortgage rate, and then they're going to have an amazing historic low rate for the next 25 years. And by the way, they themselves can do that when they put the house for sale in 5 years, and it can be assumed again. And the assumption fees to do deals like this don't cost much. Loan officers don't like these because they don't get paid any commission. So don't be surprised if you don't find a lot of readily available information on this from your local Larry the Lender.
You know what you just reminded me of? It's not just that they're getting the lower rate. It's a shorter mortgage term,
too.
I mean, it's brilliant, right?
Yes, of course.
And by the way, I'm glad you brought that up. And by the way, most of your MLSs allow you to search by the word assumable.
Well, most buyers, I don't think most buyers are sophisticated enough to know what I just said.
No, the buyers won't, but as a buyer's agent, you can search for assumable.
Okay, so explaining what I just explained in any kind of public-facing description in the MLS is about impossible. But here's what you could explain. You could just simply say available as a 25-year mortgage at 3.75%, assuming the seller's mortgage, and just leave it like that.
Watch your phone ring.
Right. I don't know how much information you're going to have to put in there to comply with mortgage lending standards, but hopefully you're understanding.
Just say you must qualify.
Yeah. Now, okay, I'll give you guys another one. Sorry, I'm geeked up. So you're going to go on a listing presentation with an expired seller in the next 2 days. Boom, shows up as soon as you get done listening to our podcast. Sellers in the same situation. It's $1 million house, $300,000 equity, maybe $500,000. They have a 3.5% interest rate mortgage. It is assumable because they almost always are. And you're going to be able to say, Mr. Seller, here's your condition is great, your location is great, your price is great. But you know what? The agent didn't necessarily know about one of the best advantages of your home. It's this ridiculously low interest rate you have on this mortgage. And if we market it this way and do this, don't you think that seller is going to think you walk on water after you explain to them? That's what you got from today's podcast. That's just today.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bob.
Exactly. Right. We're done.
And you know what else I was thinking? Go ahead.
Well, so imagine what you're going to get when you join Premier Coaching as a Premier Coaching client. This is just real estate training. You want to join Premier Coaching if you want next level actual coaching. And the best part of we made Premier Coaching for free for you. Hell, with the suggestion we just gave to you, you can pay for Premier Coaching for like 5 years, depending on your average sale price.
At least.
So go to premiercoaching.com or text the word Premier to 47372, and you can join Premier Coaching for free. Please share this podcast with many other agents as you possibly can. Help us help the industry to get their head out of their collective you-know-whats so they can realize their best years of real estate in their lives are still ahead of them.
Yes, and as you were talking about the assumable, there is maybe a cousin to that I don't think I had in here. I actually saw somebody in our neighborhood in Puerto Rico, agent advertising this, that let's say there is no mortgage at all. The house is paid off. Seller financing.
Yeah.
Okay. Seller financing does not have to be at market rate. Maybe the seller's happy getting 5.5% or 6% on the full deal or on part of the deal.
Well, here's how you'd sell it to your seller. And that one in particular was $11 million. I saw it
Oh, you
too.
did?
Aaron's listing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So $11 million, and the seller will carry, and I don't even think the seller wanted very much money down.
Yeah.
Bill, where's the risk to the seller? Again, advanced geek information for all of you. If the seller's the primary mortgage holder, not the second or third lien, but the first lien, if that buyer stops paying the mortgage amount, the seller gets to keep, or the owner gets to keep, their down payment, any improvements they made to the property, and they get the property back. So if your seller has enough money that they can actually be the mortgagee, they should consider being the mortgagee because they can make a better than market return. So for example, if they were to take that $10 million and they put it in the S&P 500, at 8%, let's say they're going to charge that borrower for owner financing for 8.5%. They're getting a better return on investment, and it's an asymmetrical risk. There's no risk because if the buyer turns out to be a deadbeat, they can take the house back.
Exactly. So, which makes the point, this is not just a handshake deal. It sounds, because it's unusual to them, it may sound like a weird thing. This is all filed. There are legal documents. Your
Yep.
title company knows how to do it. It's a real mortgage, right? It's just not from a mortgage lender.
When times get really tough, what you see is sellers that own their own homes outright will do similar to no down payment deals, but what they'll do is the buyer has to put improvements into the property. Mm-hmm. So for example, and this was really common when Julie and I got into real estate, frankly, when the market was a lot tougher, is you would have, again, buyers that couldn't qualify for financing. A great interest rate was 7%. Our first rate was like 7. What was it, Julie? You remember?
7.25.
There you go. See, told you.
And we were happy to have it.
Yeah, we were. People congratulated
Yeah.
us. But people with, less, we were just basically kids. We were, I think, 22 and 23. But yeah, so that was a great rate. But there were properties for sale that were no money down on with sellers that own the homes outright. Mm-hmm. But you had to, within say 12 months, replace all the windows, or you had to within 12 months put a new, that type of thing. So they would make you improve the value of the house. In the event that you stop making the house payment, they'd get the house back with the improvements.
Remember, they would call that sweat equity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you get things like that, but fortunately we're not in markets like that, and I don't think we're going to be anytime in our lifetimes.
No, but what's interesting is because homes have gone up in value so much in the past 4 or 5 years, there are a lot of homes that are paid off. There's a ton of sellers that have lots and lots of equity, so that allows people to be more creative.
Right.
Okay, so number 2, officially, I think we're like now number 5.
Well, we give them 2 maybe 3 bonus points.
Exactly. Okay, so paying discount points. Discount points are another way to lower interest rates. Buyers pay a lump sum at closing to reduce their mortgage rate for the life of the loan. Remember, buyers have a lot of money down, especially if they just sold a house. Each discount point costs 1% of the loan amount and generally reduces the rate by 0.125 to 0.25%. It depends on the lender. Okay. So buyers can pay for discount points themselves or negotiate with the seller or builder to cover the cost, especially in a buyer's market or when purchasing new construction. It's very common in new construction. So I give you some examples in the newsletter of how to do that. Okay.
Well, but here's what really matters. If you're competing against new construction, what the builder is doing is like, so if you were to, and for the most part, the builder's homes are more expensive than the resale homes. That's not always true, but for the most part, maybe 50, maybe $100,000 more. That's again
apples to apples. If it's new construction, it's going to be more.
but the payment is lower than if that prospective buyer were to buy a resale home. So the buyer's, quagmire is, I'm going to have to pay $100,000 more for this new home, but guess what? I have to put no money into this thing. Everything is new. Whereas if I buy that resale home, it's going to inevitably have a life cycle. The furnace needs replaced, all these things, right? And you're going to start thinking about that. But the payment on the resale home, because the interest rate on the mortgage is going to be higher, because what the builder is doing is they're taking some of the money that you're paying for the home and they're buying down the interest rate. They're making it, they're going to usually their in-house lender, and they're giving that lender tens of thousands in some cases. Discount points to buy the rates down, or do, adjustable rate.
Or a 3-2-1 buy down.
Right.
Yeah.
Do adjustable rate mortgages to make the payment a lot lower. So that's the reason that new construction is such a pain in the ass to compete against, because the payment's lower and the buyer gets a newer product, usually with better amenities, usually with, frankly, a more modern floor plan.
And because, especially with a 3-2-1 buy down, where you're coming in 3% lower than market interest rates, more buyers qualify at that lower payment. This is something builders have done for years. So you're getting, at least in the buyer's mind, more house, and it's new, to your point, no repairs, for a lower interest rate and a lower introductory payment. So just make sure you know what they're signing up for, and you need to meet with your builder reps and know what the deal is.
And if you're taking a listing, or if you have listings that aren't selling, or if you're about to go after some expireds, I assure you, if you've got new construction, that's one of the biggest, reasons why the listing didn't sell or won't sell as fast, because you're competing against new construction. New construction has to be considered when pricing a property. So you need to really have all those builder reps as your best friends. I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, and you can do it once you understand how they're subsidizing that loan with buy down points, et cetera. Assuming your seller has equity, the seller can offer a similar type of deal, and you can advertise it in your MLS that they are meeting what the builder is doing.
Okay, so what is Julie saying? Mr. Seller, at list price, let's say the list price is $525. At list price, Mr. Seller, we're going to take $15,000 of your dollars, and maybe the seller would be willing to accept $500, right? But he wants to list it at $519. Notice how it's always a he that wants to overprice. Isn't that true though? Right? So he wants to list it at $519, even though the market is telling us it's $500. But the seller is agreeing to take $15,000 or $10,000 of that to go towards the buyer's closing costs, down payment, buy down the points, all these things to make the payment lower, so the house is more competitive with new construction. You all following us on this? All right, so that's at list price. So if the buyer comes in and negotiates, wants a lower price, and then wants all the extras that the seller was, the buying of the rates down, all the rest of it, the seller can say no. But at list price, these are the tchotchkes you get. That's what you're going to start realizing, that payments are always the most important thing for every buyer. Even sometimes, not the ones paying cash, but in all price ranges. I'll give you guys a fun statistic. I read this online about a month ago. I was really shocked to learn that something in most major markets, 90% of cars over 250 grand are financed. And I was really surprised when I dug into a little deeper. Ferrari is a publicly traded company, as you guys might know. And Ferrari has its own finance arm. And you obviously, because it's publicly traded, you can read about all the things. And their average price was $400,000. And again, almost 90% of all their cars are financed. Again, that goes to the fact that people are always shopping payment no matter what price range of whatever they're buying.
True.
That's not the same behavior as it was 20 years ago, but who cares? This is the new reality. So make sure you keep that in mind no matter what the price point of the house that you're listing or trying to get your buyer to buy.
Well, that's why in Dan's example, a multi-million-dollar house with an assumable loan. Who would have thought? Isn't that... I think a lot of people think, oh, well, that's only for first-time or FHA buyers.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So you got to know about this stuff, guys. All right, number 3, adjustable rate mortgages. ARMs, or adjustable rate mortgages, kind of got a bad reputation during the housing crash, and that's why we've got to look at what they actually are, different than back then. An adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM offers a low fixed interest rate for an initial fixed period, usually 5, 7, or 10 years, before adjusting annually based on market conditions. So that would be a 5-1 ARM versus a 30-year fixed. And I give you examples. You can get them in the newsletter. But the takeaway is that adjustable rate mortgages offer significant savings during the fixed rate period. It's not like, we talked about 3-2-1 buy downs. This is the rate the first year, the second year, the third year.
Well,
these are locked in for a specific amount of time.
What some people will do is they'll do a 5-year ARM or 5-1, and they'll refinance into another one, into another one, into another one. So they refinance like before the rate adjusts. So they're always on the initial low rate and they just keep on refinancing. Make sure when you're helping a buyer do that, you make sure there's no prepayment penalty so that they can continuously refinance and keep to the low initial rate.
Well, the other cool thing is maybe that buyer already knows that they're going to move in the next 5 years.
Right.
So, their rate is always going to be what they signed up for. They're going to move on year 4. Or if it's a 7-year, then they're moving before that.
Well, depending on the price point, what some people will do is they'll use adjustable rate mortgages to get the payment lower, and they'll pay more towards the balance or the voluntarily, and they'll get the mortgage paid off in faster than 15 years. They'll just do that, and they'll get them paid off in sometimes 7 or 10 years.
Yes.
You can use, guess what, AI to help you figure that out. If you guys, for example, if you have a house right now that the payment is a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, and you made a double payment, I'm speaking in generalities, but I'm pretty sure I'm accurate about this. If you made a double payment on that house, just the principal and the interest, and you did it for the next 10 years, the house will be paid off. So, know all this stuff and use AI to kind of do some of this math and educate yourself. It's very interesting.
Yes, that's true. And here's the reason we're spending the time like this. You are providing value to your buyers very obviously with this kind of information and coaching of you to them. A whole generation of you has been brought up thinking that it's just about the 30-year fixed with the 20% down payment at market rate, because for years that was a good deal. But now that rates have gone up and you're getting that objection nonstop, you have to have a breadth of knowledge to do your transactions.
Well, it's conventional wisdom that you want to live debt free because there's no such thing as someone with debt that went bankrupt.
Yeah.
But it's not. I would say it's not. It's not what most people are preaching nowadays.
No.
Most people are always talking about leverage and borrowing and all the rest of it, and so you have to be in alignment with your market's expectation. So when Julie and I say pay the house off, that actually might not be appealing to you, and it might not be appealing to your buyers or your sellers. We're not judging, but just do understand the nature of your community. If your community is people of a certain age and they're, very traditional value, they want to be debt free. Whereas the younger generations, they definitely look at debt differently. And I don't really have a very steadfast opinion on which is right or which is wrong, because if you can borrow money at 6%, but you can get 10% as the rate of return on it if you put it in the S&P of 500, you're kind of dumb not to borrow the money and then put the money that you would have put towards paying cash for that house in the S&P.
Smaller down payment and invest the rest.
Yeah, I mean, there's, so I get it. But again, be in alignment with what your market's expecting, and don't try to fire hose them with like more traditional Dave Ramsey type advice. Not, Dave Ramsey's advice is great, don't get me wrong. But if you're telling your Dave Ramsey advice to a market that doesn't really think like that, you're going to be out of alignment with the thinking that they have.
Well, all you have to know is that more than 50% of buyers are still financing. So you need to know more about financing.
Right. Well, even, again, my point about Ferrari, even very wealthy people are financing.
That's right, because they've decided that's a better decision for them with that amount of money.
Right.
Okay, so new construction we talked about, but I wanted to give some specific timely examples. Builders use rate buydowns to make new homes more appealing and more affordable. For example, and this is hot off the presses, MI Homes, which you and I and Coach Rochelle sold tons of, offers a 2-1 temporary buydown on select homes right now, bringing the first-year rate down to 1.875 for FHA loans. Yes, you heard it right. Increasing to 2.875 in the second year and 3.875 from year 3 onward. That's an FHA deal through MI. That is for homes closing by the end of this year.
So they're buying down the FHA deal.
Yep.
Wow.
So they're combining things, FHA plus a buy down. So imagine you got an objection. Somebody, doesn't want to pay the going rate of around 7%. They don't want to spend a bunch of money on an old home. This is the killer solution. And MI builds a ton of different states, very much in the Midwest and the South. Okay, national builders, that's a brand, contribute 5 to 6% of the home purchase price to lower mortgage rates by 1 or 2 points, often reducing the interest rate to 5% from a market rate of 6.5%.
Is that fixed?
I believe
That's
it is.
fixed. Wow.
Yes, and another standard option is a 2-1 buy down, which can drop the rate to 4.5% in the first year and 5.5% in the second year before it goes to the full rate. The third option is Century Communities. You guys can look these up. Has been offering buy downs that bring rates to 5.99. Cost of the buy down ranges from 3 to 5% of the home sales price, depending on the underlying mortgage rate and the loan amount. So those incentives make new construction obviously super attractive by reducing the payments early on in the loan, giving buyers an easier path to homeownership in a higher rate environment. So stop taking the objection, I'm not going to buy right now because rates are too high.
Well, it really all comes down to a simple fact that our home's going to be more expensive or less expensive in a year.
Absolutely more expensive.
Yeah, there you go. And so even if you wait a year and your interest rate drops, what's the payment going to be? Let's say interest rates drop, 30-year fixed drops to 5.5%. And let's say that the $500,000 house is now 525 or 550. And say right now the best rate you can get is 6.5%. What's the payment difference?
And the down payment difference.
Right. So you're actually better off if you do the math, but you're actually better off if you buy the house now, even with, like I said, a slightly scratchy interest rate, and you refinance when the rates go down because you've secured the asset. That's the main thing.
Or use some of, I think the average down payment is something like 12%. It's not 20%.
And look at all the morons, and I'll say them what they are, who are predicting that house values were going to plummet and there was going to be some sort of collapse and it was going to be some sort of real estate apocalypse again. Whatever happened to all those bridge trolls? They're gone.
How'd that work out for them?
Yeah, exactly. And there are all these people, post-COVID and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So moral of the story is everyone, other than those who have an agenda, are going to be in agreement that home values are going to continue to inflate along with the rate of inflation, if not outpace the rate of inflation. I haven't come across a credible source that's predicting anything other than that. Do you believe it's anything other than that? Well, if home values and inflation is going to drive costs up, that means that home that they're deciding to not buy now because they're waiting for rates to fall might be out of their price range in the future, even with lower rates. And you got to just, go back to them when they make some of these broad statements. And like some of you are just shut down. Why want to wait for rates to fall? And then you say what I said at the top of the call, Mr. Seller, I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact you want a lower interest rate. But may I ask why you think that would be an advantage to you? And then the secondary question, before they really have a chance to answer, because the answer is obvious, is then you give them the secondary question, Mr. Seller, will there be more demand or less demand for homes if rates fall? Will there be more buyers with lower rates or fewer buyers? And the answer is obvious. There'll be more buyers. Mr. Seller, with more demand for more buyers, what will that do to the value of homes? What will that do to the cost of homes? Have you considered the fact that waiting, even though you will get a lower rate, most likely, is going to cause you to actually pay far more potentially for that house? Wouldn't it make more sense? Wouldn't it be better for you to buy the house now at the rate that's going to be maybe considered high in a year and just refinance? Wouldn't that make more sense to you? Or maybe we can talk about doing a buy down. Maybe we can talk about one of the other strategies that Julie and I just presented to you in today's podcast. All right. So the point is think bigger. You're a real estate agent. You're on this planet to be of service to other people. Be of service to them in the manner in which they expect you to be by being the solution solver, especially when it comes to some of the misinformation they have about whether it's smart to buy now or wait.
Yeah. So here's the script you're not going to use anymore. Yeah, I'm waiting for rates to come down too. That doesn't work for you. You got to cut that out. I mean, what I would go to is if you knew there was a way, or if I could show you 3 or 4 different ways that you could be closing today at 3.5%, 4.5%, or even the builder example of 1.875%, what would that do to your plans? That creates conversation, that creates strategy, that creates a buyer appointment this weekend that, rates really suck right now, does not create for you.
Exactly. Hopefully you guys found this podcast educational and motivational. Now it's time for you to get into action. Please do consider giving us a 5-star review over on iTunes. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us be in alignment with our highest and truest purpose, which is being of service to all of you, our real estate agents. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.